I'm Katie Wilson and you're watching A News. Let's see the headlines making the news this afternoon. President Trump says very friendly talks are underway with Iran, but warns strikes could start again soon. 7 are killed in the latest Russian attacks on Ukraine as Zelensky arrives in Washington. And President Macron warns France is facing its most severe situation since the Second World War as the wildfires rage on. Thanks for joining us. President Trump says the US is having good talks with Iran, indicating a deal may be on the way to end the conflict. But he's warned that the US strikes would resume if the negotiations fail. Tehran, however, has contradicted the claims, saying no direct talks are underway despite the current pause in military action. Here's more.
US President Donald Trump says Washington is holding what he called very friendly talks with Iran and suggested a possible deal could be within reach. Speaking at a rally in Michigan, Trump argued that the military campaign had forced Tehran back to the negotiating table.
No, you can't bribe them. You got to beat them, and we're beating the hell out of them. But we'll see how it turns out. Right now, they have very friendly negotiations going on. And by the way, how good is our Navy with a blockade? How good? Not one boat gets in.
But Iran strongly rejected that claim. Foreign Ministry spokesman Esmail Baghaei said there are no direct negotiations with the United States. He accused Washington of violating previous understandings and said Iran would only act to protect its national interests.
No agreement can be unilaterally implemented. This is natural. Therefore, Iran has ceased fulfilling its commitments. When the time becomes right, we will discuss future development directions. But one thing is certain, Iran will never compromise on its national interests and security principles.
The US paused its strikes after mediating countries asked President Trump to allow more time for diplomacy. Iran has also stopped its attacks, following nearly 2 weeks of exchanges that effectively ended the ceasefire agreed in June. Markets reacted positively to signs of possible de-escalation, with oil prices falling more than 9% during Monday's trading before recovering some ground.
Well, Saudi Arabia and Oman have reaffirmed the importance of safeguarding navigation through the Strait of Hormuz amid the ongoing tensions. In a phone call on Monday, the Saudi foreign minister and his Omani counterpart discussed efforts to ensure safe and free passage through the strategic waterway. Meanwhile, Iran says it is holding separate talks with Oman on the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman described the discussions as strictly bilateral and unrelated to the United States. Despite a pause in US-Iran strikes, shipping activity remains subdued. Iran has again stated that a vessel hit by a Ukrainian drone in the Caspian Sea was carrying non-military cargo. It says Kyiv will be held accountable for the strike. Kyiv says the attack disrupted the supply of Russian weapons materials. Tarash Ralu has the latest from Tehran.
Iran's ambassador to Russia, Kazem Jalali, has strongly condemned a recent Ukrainian drone hitting an Iranian vessel in the Caspian Sea at the weekend as a criminal act. He says the ship was totally commercial, carrying no military cargo. Speaking to a state IRNA news agency in Moscow on Monday, the envoy said it was justified to expect that Russia will retaliate because it happened when the merchant ship was in Russia's territorial waters. Iranian Foreign Minister Saeed Abbas Araghchi said in a post on X that in discussions with European Union Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, he emphasized that the strike, which claimed the life of one Iranian sailor, cannot remain unanswered. In the meantime, the Iranian embassy in Poland has issued a formal warning to Ukrainian leadership, stating that Tehran reserves the right to respond under the United Nations Charter. It said in a statement that Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is attempting to drag Europe and NATO into a military conflict with Iran. It also accused the Ukrainian president of exceeding his authority, warning that Tehran's restraint is not endless. In Tehran, the Deputy Speaker of the Parliament, Hamid Reza Haji Babai, warned what he called Ukraine's taskmasters that any mischief by their so-called contractor in the Caspian Basin will result in a regretful response from the Iranian nation. IRNA quoted the senior MP as making the warning to Ukraine and the countries that he said incited Kiev to carry out the attack in an address during a parliamentary session on Monday. And Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai said the attack was illegitimate and contrary to the UN Charter and international accords, rejecting Kiev's claim on linking Tehran to the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. Speaking at a weekly press conference on Monday, he added that other Caspian littoral states have expressed their deep concern and stressed that Tehran will respond appropriately. Turash Shiralilu from Tehran Foreign News.
Well, Ukraine's president says Iran and North Korea are already involved in the war against Ukraine by supplying Russia with weapons, military technology and troops. Zelensky made his comments during an interview with the UK's Sky News. Coming after Ukraine's attack on a vessel in the Caspian Sea at the weekend, Zelensky rejected suggestions that Kyiv was opening a new front in the conflict. He said Tehran and Pyongyang had already become participants in the war through their support for Moscow. Zelensky has arrived in Washington for talks with President Trump. He is also holding high-level meetings on Capitol Hill, which are expected to reinforce US support for Ukraine. It comes as senior lawmakers weigh one of the most significant Russia sanctions packages in recent months. The Senate is also expected to begin voting on a bipartisan sanctions bill on Moscow. The legislation seeks to curb Russia's energy revenues that help finance its war in Ukraine. Well, over in Ukraine, at least 7 people have been killed and more than 20 injured in the latest strikes in the eastern Donetsk region. Officials say several frontline areas have been targeted, with homes and civilian infrastructure coming under heavy drone and artillery fire. Meanwhile, Russian officials said a Ukrainian drone strike killed 1 person near to the border city of Kostiantynivka. An apartment building near Moscow was also hit in a separate drone attack. The Russian Defense Ministry also said its forces struck 2 Ukrainian vessels in the Black Sea, including one transporting military cargo and another at a port in southern Ukraine. The Kremlin says it remains open to fresh proposals as diplomatic efforts continue over the war. Russia's Foreign Ministry spokeswoman was responding to reports that US and Ukrainian officials had discussed presenting plans for a possible air ceasefire to Moscow, but the Kremlin said it had received no specific details ahead of Trump and Zelensky's meeting in Washington.
For our part, we reaffirm our readiness for a political and diplomatic settlement of the Ukrainian crisis, something we have never renounced. I even gave examples of this today. But it should be based on the understandings reached, those in Alaska. We again confirm our readiness to consider possible discussions, proposals, and ideas. No one on our side has ever refused that.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is also in Washington for his first face-to-face meeting with President Trump since the conflict with Iran began. The meeting comes as tensions remain high between the two leaders over a disagreement on Middle East policy. It also carries political significance for Netanyahu ahead of October's election. While demonstrators opposed to the visit are renewing calls for Israel's accountability over the war in Gaza.
Pro-Palestinian protesters gathered in Washington, D.C. ahead of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's meeting with US President Donald Trump. Demonstrators say they're against US support for Israel. Some also called for action over an arrest warrant for Netanyahu that was issued by the International Criminal Court.
Well, I mean, for starters, Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal. He doesn't belong in our country. The only place he belongs is locked up with the ICC. There's a criminal warrant out for it, and then I don't want my tax dollars going to defend someone like that.
Yeah, our heart goes out to every single one of the people in Palestine. We send our love, we send our prayers, and we're doing everything we can out on the streets, and we're just praying.
It's Netanyahu's first face-to-face meeting with President Trump since the conflict with Iran began at the end of February. The visit comes amid ongoing tensions over Middle East policy and is seen as politically important for the Israeli leader ahead of October's election. President Trump has previously said Netanyahu will not be arrested while in the United States. The International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Netanyahu in 2024 over alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity during the Gaza conflict. Israel rejects the court's jurisdiction and denies the allegations.
For more on this, joining us now is Maurice Hirsch from the Jerusalem Centre for Security and Foreign Affairs. Great to have you with us, Maurice. Now, as our VT mentioned, their first meeting since the conflict with Iran began. Why do you think Netanyahu has been working so hard to secure this meeting with Trump?
I think there are a lot of very important things that need to be discussed face to face. When you do and conduct all of your communications either via telephone or even via Zoom, it has one effect, but that effect of being in the same room, shaking hands with the other side, that eye contact, which is so important, and really the entire body language of these discussions is an integral part of maintaining that close relationship between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I think really that's why he wants to get into the room and speak heart to heart, face to face with President Trump.
And how aligned do you think these leaders are on their policy towards Iran? Do you think they're still as united as they were back in February?
I think without question, I think that President Trump has shown that he is first and foremost concerned with America's security. And America's security can only be guaranteed by preventing a nuclear Iran. A nuclear Iran would threaten not only Europe, but also the United States. When they go out with these mass demonstrations of the IRGC, they first and foremost call for the death of America. And only afterwards do they call for the death of Israel. So, and President Trump really takes these people seriously and says, these people are not just spouting off of their mouth. What they say is their true intentions, and allowing them to pass that nuclear threshold would fundamentally endanger the United States of America. And so really the goals are aligned. Preventing Iran from reaching that nuclear threshold is again an American interest, as well as being obviously an Israeli interest. And so on that fundamental level, I think the leaders, both leaders, are truly fundamentally and unequivocally aligned.
And what about on the issue of Lebanon? Do you think the two leaders are just as aligned there? We've been hearing reports that Trump has pushed Netanyahu to stop fighting against Hezbollah.
So yes, I think there are very much common practices and common goals and interests between Israel and America in Lebanon. Israel wants a secure northern border, free of Hezbollah, free of attacks from Hezbollah, Iran, it's the same thing, into Israel. And America wants the best interest of Lebanon as well, that should be free from this Iranian Hezbollah influence, which is really destroying Lebanon from within. And that's something which is an alignment of interests, bringing Lebanon into the Abraham Accords, which have been a tremendous success for the Middle East in general, for the countries that have been involved. And that would be, I think, a tremendous step forward. Let's take off another one of these countries that are at war with Israel. Lebanon and Israel really have no conflict. It's Hezbollah and Iran that have a conflict with Israel.
Now, you're already indicating sort of the outcomes that Netanyahu is hoping for. What do you think will be the ideal outcome from this meeting that Netanyahu wants to take back to Tel Aviv?
So I think that what we've seen so far, just leading up to the meeting, is, and your report really started on the subject of what is the best interest of the Palestinians. And there is also alignment between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump, allowing the International Stabilization Force to enter Gaza and to disarm Hamas. Having Hamas, a genocidal terrorist organization, continuing to lead the Gaza Strip is not in the best interest of the Palestinians. It is not pro-Palestinian to support Hamas and Hamas's continued dominance and dictatorship over the Gaza Strip. That is not something which anyone wants to see. And there I think we see alignment between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump. Let's move forward, disarming Hamas and providing a safer and more prosperous future for the Gaza Strip. Once we've achieved that goal, once we've shown that there is a possibility to denazify the Palestinian society and to get to a stage where we're living a prosperous life on both sides of whatever divide it may be, we can then obviously expand that experience to include the entire Palestinian population living to the west of the Jordan River. And that is something which is an Israeli interest, a Palestinian interest, and certainly an American interest as well.
Now, both of these leaders are facing the electorate in the coming months. To what extent do you think that will be on their minds during this meeting and could potentially affect the outcomes of this meeting?
I think politicians are constantly thinking about one thing and one thing alone, being re-elected. It's obviously a factor within many of the decisions that are made, whether it be the timing of the war and the timing of the ceasefire, going to the obviously the midterm elections for President Trump. It's important to ensure that the US economy is as strong as possible and has as few obstacles to its improvement as possible, which is why I believe that he's holding off on any further expansion of the war with Iran to ensure that oil prices don't skyrocket just before the midterms. For Prime Minister Netanyahu, obviously, this is a critical period of time. He's going to elections for the first time after the October 7 massacre, and it's going to be a very, very heated debate running up to those elections. And so obviously showing alignment with the United States on what are perceived to be Israel's critical security interests is in his electoral interest as well. And so both of the leaders are looking for give and take from either side. And I think that is an important part of the meeting itself.
All eyes on those Israeli elections in October. I'm sure we'll hear more from you then in the run-up to those. But for now, thank you very much for joining us on the programme and providing your insight.
Thank you very much for having me.
A diplomatic dispute between two of the United Nations Security Council's closest allies has spilled into public view. The United States walked out of a council meeting as France addressed the chamber, following an escalating row over the reappointment of the United Nations human rights chief.
United States diplomats walked out of a United Nations Security Council meeting on Russia's war against Ukraine as France's delegation took the floor. The move followed a public dispute over Washington's decision to vote against extending the mandate of UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk. The disagreement intensified after France's UN mission in Geneva said the United States was no longer a beacon of human rights and had aligned itself with countries including Russia and North Korea in opposing the renewal. US Ambassador Mike Waltz responded on X, accusing France of supporting a human rights chief who criticizes democratic nations such as the United States and Israel, while, he claimed, showing leniency towards authoritarian governments. After the walkout, alternate US Representative Dan Negrea told the Council the American delegation would continue leaving the chamber during French statements until Paris renounced what he described as condescending and disrespectful rhetoric.
We have stood by this member state through every conflict in which their freedoms have been imperiled. And today, I remind them that it is the United States that remains the beacon of liberty for the world. As such, we will not be affording them the benefit of listening to their politicized drivel until they renounce their condescending and disrespectful rhetoric and behave in a manner commensurate with their seat on this council.
France's ambassador, Jérôme Bonnafont, made no reference to the protest during his address, saying France remained committed to preserving the independence of the United Nations and its ability to act. The dispute comes after the UN General Assembly voted overwhelmingly to grant Volker Turk a second four-year term, with 144 countries in favour, 10 against and 13 abstentions. Washington had opposed the renewal and warned it could reassess its funding and engagement with the United Nations, highlighting growing tensions between the Trump administration and the organisation.
After the break, President Macron warns France is facing its most severe situation since the Second World War as the wildfires rage on. Welcome back to A News. Emergency teams are racing to bring wildfires near Madrid and Bordeaux under control ahead of another major heat wave expected later this week. President Macron says France is facing the most severe situation since the Second World War, with around 250,000 people now evacuated from their homes.
Firefighters in southwestern France have made progress against massive wildfires threatening Bordeaux. But authorities warn that rising temperatures and strong winds could reverse those gains. The blazes have destroyed about 42,000 hectares near the Atlantic coast, forcing more than 200,000 residents and holidaymakers to evacuate and disrupting rail services. Around 2,500 firefighters, supported by aircraft and military personnel, have been deployed. One fire in the Landes region has been contained, while another in Gironde remains intense. President Emmanuel Macron visited Bordeaux, where he thanked emergency crews and said France would examine its response once the immediate danger had passed.
We will review the lessons learned, and I personally guarantee that we will keep improving as we have after every crisis. But we prepared together in advance. A tremendous amount of work was carried out with reinvestment across all civilian and military sectors. Right now we must stay united and focused on action. Women and men are risking everything to protect others and fight the fire. All we must do is help them.
Residents said clearer skies on Monday had brought some relief, although many remain prepared to leave at short notice.
Yes, we are climate migrants, evacuees in any case. We evacuated the Cap Ferret Peninsula as early as Thursday evening. We came to take refuge in the Bordeaux area, and now we are waiting for a potential return. Every day we pray that we'll be able to go home.
The crisis has also spread across Spain, where around 100,000 people have been ordered to evacuate or seek shelter. Several major fronts remain active, including a blaze in Avila, described as the largest in Spain's recent history. International crews and aircraft have joined the response as firefighters race to strengthen containment lines before another heatwave arrives later this week.
To more extreme weather, and a powerful tornado has left a trail of destruction across parts of the US state of Wisconsin. The storm has damaged homes and businesses, uprooting trees, overturning vehicles, and cutting power to thousands of residents. Local authorities declared a state of disaster, closing roads and urging people to stay indoors because of the conditions. Emergency shelters have also been opened as officials work to assess the full extent of the damage. Staying in Canada, police say a gunshot has been fired outside the US consulate in Toronto for the second time this year. Investigators have found evidence that a firearm had been discharged outside the embassy building on Monday. The authorities say a white saloon car with no number plates fled the scene. No one was injured and an investigation is underway. Two suspects fired multiple rounds from a handgun at the consulate entrance back in March before fleeing. Australia is taking a fresh look at strengthening its fuel security as global tensions continue to disrupt energy supplies. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says the government will explore building the country's first new oil refinery in more than 6 decades, aiming to reduce reliance on imported fuel and better prepare for future supply shocks. The proposal comes as the conflict in the Middle East highlights the risk facing countries that depend heavily on overseas energy imports.
So I can't think of anywhere better than here, and building an oil refinery here on the west coast would obviously build our resilience as a nation, as well as particularly benefit Western Australia, which plays such a critical role in Australia's economy. So this will be, if it is successful, the first new-scale petrol refinery built in Australia since the 1960s.
Apple's incoming chief executive says he's committed to growing the streaming and film businesses when he succeeds Tim Cook in September. John Turnus says Apple TV will continue expanding after the success of titles such as Oscar-winning Coda, Ted Lasso and The Studio. Meanwhile, Cook says Apple's strategy is to focus on producing the best TV content. The company says it remained open to future partnerships, citing its collaboration with Formula One as an example.
You know, our role is to be the best. That's our lane. We're not about the most. There are other companies that do that, but we're about the best. And I feel like we really hit our stride in providing that. If you want to watch something great, you can just go and select a movie or a show blindly, and it will be great.
Yeah, I think we have such tremendous momentum right now on Apple TV, right? There's so many amazing shows, so many amazing characters and stories, and so we're just going to keep building on that momentum.
South Korea's leading stock market has fallen nearly 11% amid a slump in chip-related tech stocks. Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix led the declines, falling by around 10% each, with investors rattled by mounting concerns over the cost of funding AI infrastructure and growing competition from China. The sell-off pushed South Korea's benchmark Kospi index down over 700 points in its worst trading session in 5 months. An attack on a village in Nigeria's Kaduna state has left at least 30 people dead. Residents say gunmen struck overnight. Local authorities said the armed men stormed a village shortly before midnight, opening fire and setting homes ablaze. Officials said that at least 30 people were killed, including 8 children, while several others were injured. Residents say women, children and elderly people were among the victims, and that security personnel arrived hours after the attackers fled. Meanwhile, Nigeria and Ghana are stepping up pressure on South Africa following a wave of violence targeting African migrants. Both countries have condemned the attacks, with Nigeria demanding stronger action and Ghana continuing to evacuate its nationals to safety.
Nigeria and Ghana are urging South Africa to do more to prevent xenophobic attacks. At least 98 Nigerians had been killed since 2022, and officials say at least 1,400 of its nationals have been evacuated. Meanwhile, Ghana announced the evacuation of around 1,000 more citizens. The countries warn that it's straining their bilateral ties and raises concerns over possible state complicity after alleging police had failed to intervene.
This xenophobic attack had gone beyond, attack on criminals. We have record of Nigerians who have legitimate papers to remain in South Africa, yet they have been attacked. And we could see some mob actions, which we saw the police watching as if they are helpless to address this situation, which to us raises issues of state responsibility. It raises the issues of complicity.
Ghana also plans to raise the issue at the African Union, with secured ECOWAS backing, calling for a coordinated continental response to protect migrants and prevent further violence.
The petition highlights the recurring loss of lives, attacks on African migrants, destruction of businesses, and threats to the principles of African unity, free movement, and continental integration, which we must all admit is the bedrock, the foundation of the formation of the OAU.
South Africa says President Cyril Ramaphosa's government remains firmly opposed to xenophobia, racism, and discrimination.
Staying in Africa, Chad has begun the formal process of withdrawing from the International Criminal Court, becoming the 5th country to take the step in recent months. The move adds to mounting pressure on the court as it searches for a new chief prosecutor. Chad accused the ICC of disproportionately targeting non-Western countries, following similar withdrawal moves by Venezuela, Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger. The departures come after 82 of the court's 125 member states voted to dismiss Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan over serious misconduct. He denies any wrongdoing. A vote for a replacement is not expected before the new year. Legal experts warn possible US sanctions could make it harder to attract strong candidates. The United States Ambassador to Turkey, Tom Barrack, says he held a productive meeting with Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan about bilateral cooperation and regional issues. In a post on X, Barrack said Washington values its partnership with Turkey and will continue working with Ankara on shared challenges and opportunities. No other details were revealed about the meeting. As well as being US Ambassador to Turkey, Barrack is also Special Envoy for Syria and Iraq. Now, the meeting comes after Turkey said the United States had approved the export of engines for its homegrown Kan fighter jet, a move that could signal a reset in defence relations between the two NATO allies after years of tension. Adam Morrow reports from Istanbul.
Turkey says the United States has approved the export of General Electric F-110 engines for serial production of its domestically produced Kan fifth-generation fighter jet. If confirmed, the move could mark a significant step in improving defense ties between the two NATO allies. The announcement was made over the weekend by Turkish aerospace CEO Mehmet Demirolu at the Farnborough International Air Show in the United Kingdom. Demirolu said Washington had cleared the export of the US-made engines following a review process, removing a key obstacle that had clouded the future of Turkey's flagship combat aircraft program. U.S. authorities, however, have yet to verify the approval, and neither the State Department nor the Pentagon has issued an official statement. But if confirmed, the decision would be one of the clearest signs yet that defense cooperation between Washington and Ankara is beginning to thaw after years of friction. Relations deteriorated in 2019 when Turkey purchased the Russian-made S-400 air defense system, despite repeated objections from the United States. Washington responded by imposing sanctions on Turkey's defense procurement agency and expelling Ankara from a U.S.-led multinational F-35 fighter jet program. U.S. officials argue that operating the S-400 alongside the F-35 could compromise the aircraft's sensitive technology. Although the sanctions remain in place, bilateral defense ties have shown signs of improvement in recent months. Washington has approved the sale of F-16 fighter jets to Turkey, while President Donald Trump has signaled his willingness to readmit Turkey to the F-35 program if outstanding issues involving the S-400 are resolved. If confirmed by Washington, the reported engine approval would mark another milestone in what appears to be a slow but steady reset of U.S.-Turkey defense ties. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Well, joining me now is Dr. Melih Demirtaş, a political analyst and former diplomat from Ankara. Thank you for joining us. Now, what's the significance of this move from Washington over the Kan fighter jet system?
Thank you. Thank you again, Ms. Wilson, for having me. It's a crucial topic, I think, for Turkey and United States relations in these last maybe days after the NATO summit, this famous NATO summit. All this international media also had some scenes and some opinions. We have seen many articles about this new NATO structure. And I think Turkey and United States also gave some important signals that for this new structure, for this new term and period, they will also have some constructive and much more positive relations between each other. Because these two allies, after the, especially Second World War, we know that the United States-led world order had some important pillars in some important regions. And Turkey is, we must accept that, is one of them. But in domestic issue, in domestic politics, after 2016, we know that this coup attempt in Turkey, of course, some very tense relations with American, of course, sectors in all the, governmental level, foreign ministry, intelligence services. And we have seen that some things really also continued in a tense manner. I think President Trump's first period, presidency, is not also so positive. Some important also mistakes for the Turkish politics had been done, by Mr. Trump and his cabinet. But now, in the second term of Mr. Trump, we just see that maybe he's also cadres, foreign ministry officials, also maybe intelligence officials, seeing this necessity that very important maybe players and very important actors like Turkey, I think like Azerbaijan, such regional players are in a very critical position, especially in such an atmosphere where some actors who seem to be ally, quote unquote, of United States, like Israel. I want to pronounce here the name of Israel because in these last 3 years, we only see some destruction. We only see some war-like situations in this region. And vis-a-vis these actors, Turkey has started to be much more constructive actor, first of all for diplomacy and especially for military solutions. Now, I think these Khan jets and Khan jets equipments, I think will be a very, very important step with F-35 and the other, of course, military equipments. But first of all, I think this prestigious project of Khan give a very important, I think, stimulus also to this relations between those two countries.
And we're hearing the term reset get used a lot in the media. To what extent can we call this a reset of Turkish and American defence ties, or is it too early to be using that term?
We must understand that Turkey has discovered again this term of independence, Ms. Wilson, because independence is so important for Turkish modern history. After 1923, we see that the rise of the modern Turkish Republic. But after this, maybe 2016 and these days, the last 10 years, also we discovered once again we must be an independent actor. Independence, of course, we all independent as countries, as nation states, in our territory, but still for foreign relations, for military industry, especially for strategic calculations, many countries have important problems still in their own regions and also wider regions. And Turkey has just, I think, in this point discovered that this military industry is important. Yes, there's a setup, it is a new period for Turkey and United States relations, but doesn't mean that Turkey can turn again as a fully dependent actor to some industry or to some, like country like United States. We need, yes, some help because of this technology leading players. We must accept that United States is the #1 country still in this military technology, but that doesn't mean, as I said, it is a full reset. It is a reset for positive diplomacy. It is a reset for just we can talk between, especially presidential level, between foreign ministry and intelligence level. Because the last American president, Mr. Joe Biden's presidency, was so, I think, problematic for many countries, I think, including Turkey, also Azerbaijan, I can say. And now Mr. Trump's maybe seeing this failure of United States policy and something starts to change.
And is that what you think is in it for Washington? Why do you think Trump has made this decision?
The actor, Israel, if we can remember history, I really like to always have a reference for history, especially just near history of our region. 1948 is an important date where the modern Israeli state is created, established. We all know that. It is just also the date of the Second World War's ending and new era of United States-led world order started, which is also continuing, the effects of this world order. But after that date, slowly, also this actor, Israel, has some other maybe phases, foreign policy agendas. And now in these last 3 years, we see that how destructive can it be, especially in this Middle East and also Eurasia region. And now some actors which can be much more stable, quote unquote, also status quo preservance actor, which are like Turkey, I can say Caucasian, Central Asian, also Turkic member countries. We see that United States want to see, such actors in his camp. Yes, Russia is a reality, China is a reality, but in such an atmosphere of multipolarity, maybe we can see this world order needs much more multilateralism. And United States want to play this multilateral card, first of all, with the old friends like Turkey, and we will see, I think, next steps, but maybe in this Trump's presidency.
So just to finish off, Dr. Demirtaş, you're kind of touching on foreign policy there and what this means more broadly on the global stage. What do you think this development in the relationship between Ankara and Washington, what does that tell us about where Turkish foreign policy sits on the global stage and possibly how other regional actors or NATO members are reacting to that?
I think both, and I think Turkey is also knowing now its presence, its weight, its influence area. As I said, this 2016 as I think after a development like an assassination of Russian ambassador, we must not forget that it's a very shocking event. It's a very non-normal, situation of after 2016, it's this coup attempt. We see that Turkey must be a very careful actor in its own region. Yes, United States is a reality. Yes, NATO is a reality of this old time of this Cold War. But even this NATO started and continued to be an important source of this balance of power. We have another sources that we must talk with. I think, first of all, Russia, of course China, of course our Turkic brothers, of course it's important brother countries like Azerbaijan or Pakistan, we can say Turkey knows all these actors have a meaning, although NATO, yes, still can produce an important military friendship, an important defense partnership. But again, as we have seen in Palestine, as we have seen in Iran, some actors can be very unilateral, and Turkey knows this must be a warning for all the countries, I mean, especially in such critical regions.
Great as always to get your analysis, Dr. Demirtaş. Thank you very much for joining us today on the programme.
Thank you.
Now we are going ahead to a break now, and after the break we're going to discuss Kazakhstan resuming its oil exports through the Caspian pipeline a week after the Black Sea terminal at Novorossiysk was shut down. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Kazakhstan has resumed oil exports through the Caspian Pipeline Consortium after operations restarted at the Black Sea terminal in Novorossiysk. The terminal was shut down last week over security concerns, forcing producers to cut output and temporarily disrupting one of the country's main export routes. Our correspondent Fariza Kalimurzina reports.
Kazakhstan has resumed oil exports through the Caspian Pipeline Consortium after shipments restarted at the marine terminal in Russia's Black Sea port of Novorossiysk. According to the Energy Ministry, crude oil loading has resumed, allowing producers to restore exports through the pipeline system. Officials say shipments will continue under enhanced safety measures and will depend on the security situation. The terminal was shut down last week. The ministry said the suspension was necessary to ensure the safety of vessels, their crews and the environment in the Black Sea. As a result, the oil producers temporarily cut output. And according to Reuters, Kazakhstan's daily production of crude oil and gas condensate fell by more than half to around 1 million barrels a day, compared with an average of 2.16 million barrels in June. The country accounts for around 2% of global oil production, while the Caspian Pipeline Consortium carries about 80% of its oil exports, making it the main export route for Kazakh crude. And following this disruption, the Foreign Ministry said any actions that undermine international trade, global energy markets or supply chains are unacceptable. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Now, Afghanistan and Uzbekistan are deepening economic cooperation, signing trade agreements worth more than $200 million, while pushing ahead with new mining and energy projects. Tamim Bahis reports.
Afghanistan and Uzbekistan are moving to deepen economic cooperation following a high-level business forum and talks on investment in the mining sector. The two countries signed 22 trade agreements worth more than $200 million during the Afghan-Uzbekistan Business Forum in Kabul, according to Afghanistan's Ministry of Commerce and Industry. That event brought together Afghanistan's Minister of Commerce and Industry, Uzbekistan's Deputy Prime Minister, senior officials, and around 300 Uzbek business representatives. Both sides reaffirmed their commitment to expanding bilateral trade, with Afghanistan expressing hope that trade between the two countries could eventually reach $5 billion. Separately, Afghanistan's Minister of Mines and Petroleum met with Uzbekistan's Deputy Prime Minister and his delegation to discuss cooperation in the mining and energy sectors. The talks focused on the Kundalan copper mine, the Tuti Maidan gas project, and expanding Uzbek investment in Afghanistan's mining sector. The two sides also reviewed progress on previously signed agreements and stressed the need to accelerate their implementation. The meetings point to growing economic engagement between Afghanistan and Uzbekistan, with trade, mining and energy emerging as key areas of bilateral cooperation. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
FIFA President Gianni Infantino is pushing back against criticism over the 2026 World Cup. In an Instagram post, Infantino called the tournament the best show in the world and accused critics of spreading hate and false rumours. The post came a day after US Congressman Jamie Raskin alleged outright bribery in Infantino's relationship with President Trump. It made no mention of investigations into FIFA's ticket pricing, travel restrictions affecting supporters, or other controversies surrounding the tournament. Armenia's Prime Minister has appealed to Russia's President Putin to help resolve issues linked to Russian restrictions on Armenian exports. The measures have affected key Armenian products, including food, drinks and agricultural goods. During a phone call, Nikol Pashinyan claimed the restrictions contradicted the legal framework governing Armenia-Russia relations and the Eurasian Economic Union regulations. The European Union has also pledged 18 million euros as part of a 52 million euro package announced in early June and eased export rules for Armenian goods. Peru's President-elect Keiko Fujimori is set to be sworn into office later on Tuesday, becoming the first woman elected by popular vote to lead the country. Fujimori won a closely contested runoff against leftist rival Roberto Sanchez, securing a narrow victory after a 22-day vote review process. Her inauguration marks the end of a lengthy political journey, including 3 previous presidential bids in years of legal challenges. Fujimori takes office as Peru faces concerns over crime, economic uncertainty and political divisions. That's your news for this hour. Thank you very much for watching, and of course, stay tuned to A News for all of your latest updates. Have a wonderful rest of your day.